Chapter 1, The Nature of Art and Creativity. In this chapter, we are going to learn a little foundation for what is art. We're going to learn the book's definition of art, and hopefully we'll start to envision what our own definition of art is. We're also going to talk about the idea of creativity, which is another broad term that's really hard to define. So we're going to kind of start off with your book's definition of creativity from Chapter 1 also. Before we get started on this chapter, though, I want to discuss two words that I'm sure you've all heard before, but just so we're all on the same page. It's actually subjective and objective. And so when we're looking at artwork, like many other things in life, we can look at it subjectively or objectively. If you look at something subjectively, this is your own individual, personal opinion. And so it's affected by your own views, your experiences in life, your background. And so this is a very important viewpoint to have, obviously. And when you're looking at artwork, this is kind of your creative device to be able to round out the artwork and bring your own experience to it. But in this class, we're going to go a step further, and we're going to learn to look at art objectively. And so this is when we put aside our own personal judgments and just look at the facts. And we can do that with art. And so we're going to learn some kind of facts and rules and principles about art, just to give us a foundation for looking at artwork and understanding our artwork. Sometimes when we look at artwork, we're not going to like what we see or agree with the artist's viewpoint. And so that's a very important time to look at artwork objectively so that we can go beyond our own personal feelings and try to see the value of that artwork. And so it'll take a while, but we're going to learn how to look at artwork objectively, and I'm sure we all know how to look at artwork subjectively already. So the first piece we're going to look at is a piece by Janet Eckelman. This is Her Secret is Patience. It's from 2009. It is in Phoenix, Arizona. It is around 100 feet tall and around 100 feet wide at its widest point. This is actually a commissioned public art sculpture, and commissioned means that you are being paid for creating your artwork, and so the city of Phoenix paid her to create this. It's actually a cactus flower shape, and she wanted it to symbolize the Arizona desert. The title refers to nature itself, which is a good connection to the cactus flower and desert. It's actually from an American poet and philosopher, Ralph Waldo Emerson. The line in the poem is, "Adopt the pace of nature, her secret is patience." And so with this sculpture, she both wanted to resemble and reflect the surrounding nature. It catches and moves with the wind, and it almost looks like a choreographed dance when you can see it in person. You can easily look up YouTube videos where you can actually see this piece moving. There were a lot of objections to this piece when it was created. It cost $2.4 million. Many people believed it just looked like a giant jellyfish. And Eckelman is not even from Arizona, and so there was a lot of opposition to this piece starting off. But now once it's been built and created, a lot of people have changed their mind. They believe that this piece is kind of in comparison to the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and so it kind of gives this huge landmark for Phoenix to be known for, and so this very distinctive feature. And so this response that viewers have to the artwork is kind of activates the creativity of the artwork. And so without a viewer, what would artwork be? So we can bring our creativity to that artwork. We can disagree with it, we can agree with it, but we need to be able to back that up with fact and be able to know why we agree or disagree with an artwork. So some key terms to know is work of art. This is basically the book's definition of art, which is the visual experience of an idea formed with skill through the use of a medium. And so I agree with a lot of this definition, but I don't agree that this expression has to be formed with skill, as we'll learn in just a few minutes. And in your chapter, that there are artists that do not necessarily have skill but still create artwork. So I think we could narrow that down even more to a visual expression of an idea of experience through the use of a medium. And so a medium is a particular material along with its technique that an artist would use. So for example, paint or stone. And then another thing to remember is the plural form of medium is media. And so if an artist used paint, pastels, and charcoal, then that would be all media, mixed media, different media that the artist used. And so that's just a thing that for us to remember. It's really easy to get caught up and say mediums, but it's actually media when you're speaking about more than one medium. And so, for example, with Her Secret is Patience, this netting that she uses is made out of fiber. And then you can see some steel rods there that are holding up this netting, and then also the lighting. That's what gives it the color. And so she uses more than one medium, and so she has 3 media in this artwork. So what is creativity? I know, along with the idea of art, creativity probably means many different things to all of us. Creativity is actually the source of all art, science, and technology. And so this idea of the human imagination is very powerful, and it affects all of our daily lives. Albert Einstein actually said imagination is more important than knowledge. And so your human imagination and creativity to him was even more important than knowledge, which means a lot because he was very smart, obviously. So your book describes creativity as the ability to bring forth something new that has value. And so it must have some use or unlock some new way of thinking. And so it has some potential to be influential. And so this is a pretty good definition of creativity, I think. Skill, training, and intelligence is not necessarily associated with creativity. Your skill level or your training level does not make you creative. When you think of the most creative people in your life, you probably think of children. And so obviously they're not necessarily skilled or highly intelligent. A lot of times they're just acting from their gut and from their own human imagination. And so we all have this urge to create. This urge to create is very universal. And so it's this idea of wanting to be able to communicate beyond language. And so that's what kind of invokes this creativity and this human imagination. So in your book, it talks about the 5 traits of creativity, or 5 practices of a creative person. And I really enjoyed reading these, and I think they're very true, and that anytime we feel we're not being creative or struggling to be creative, we can think of these 5 aspects, and I hope you can use them all in this class. First, we have associating. Do you have the ability or try to make connections across seemingly unrelated fields or subjects or ideas? Questioning. Are we challenging what's given to us? Are we questioning what's placed in front of us in class or in daily life? And we can all do this respectfully, and I really encourage this to be done in this class. This is a safe place to question. Observing. Are we observing what's going on around us, observing others, observing what we're doing in a non-judgmental way so that we can have new insights and new ways of thinking? Networking. Are we open to the fact of working with others and being able to learn from them and being able to, bounce your creativity off one another? And then 5th, experimenting. Are you willing to explore new possibilities and try them, even though sometimes this may mean failing? But this is a great way to work on your creativity. So when we talked about creativity and we talked about how our skill level or training does not necessarily have to deal with your ability to be creative. And so we're going to take just a second and talk about trained and untrained artists. These are people with little or no formal art education who make art. There's 2 different kinds. There's folk artists. Folk artists are people who work within some type of established tradition. And this can be a style, a theme, or just based on craftsmanship. And so when you think of these, you can think of quilters or woodworkers or people who do hand stitching, some kind of tradition that's passed down from generation to generation. And then secondly, there's outsider artists. And these are artists who just create for personal expression. And so it's not any form of conventional practice necessarily, and so you have this kind of intense need just inside you to be able to create art. And so, for example, you might really just feel this need to draw, and so you'll wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to have a few hours to work before you actually go into your job. And so you're not necessarily trained, it's just this expression you feel like you need to release. This here piece by James Hampton is actually a piece by an outsider artist, Throne of the Third Heaven of the Nation's Millennium General Assembly. Hampton was actually a janitor in Washington, D.C., and this is all found furniture and objects wrapped in gold and silver foil, and they're placed symmetrically in his garage. He was also a Baptist minister, and he believed that Jesus needed a throne when he returned. And so this piece was actually found after Hampton passed away in his basement that he had been working on for quite a number of years. And so he would do this every day when he came home from work with these found objects he found from work. And no one knew he was doing this, and he just created this huge sculpture that was going to be a throne, and he just felt this inner need to create this. He wasn't trained to do this by any means. And this piece is actually in the Smithsonian Institute in the Outsider Artist in Washington, D.C. And so this is actually a very well-known artist, even though he was never trained. So there's 3 terms that define a work's relationship to the physical world. So there's 3 approaches artists can create artwork, and all artwork falls under one of these 3 approaches. The first is representational art. These objects represent everything, something in the everyday world, and so it's something recognizable to us. If the subject is a human, then this is also called figurative art. And the subject is just basically the object that you're representing. And so it's almost like taking a photograph. You're documenting something that we already recognize in the everyday world. This painting on the right, A Smoke Backstage, is an example of representational art. It's also an example of trompe-l'oeil, and this is actually a French term, and it's for fool the eye. And so it's actually so realistic that it looks like you could pick up this pipe and put this tobacco in it and actually smoke it. And so this is very close to life size and very realistic. It's just representing something that the artist is seeing. The second term for how an artist can create artwork is abstract art. And this artwork would take something that we already recognize, and it would simplify it, distort it, or exaggerate it. It would change something that we already know in some way. And so it changes this natural appearance. And so it may be recognizable, or it may not be recognizable at all once it's been abstracted. And so that's when the use of the title can be very helpful. So here we have a piece by Van Doesburg. In the top left, you can see this cow that he started off with, and as you move to the right, it becomes more abstracted, and all the way down to the left, and then to the far right bottom, you see how it becomes fully abstracted, where we cannot even tell what it was to begin with. And if you see, the title is Composition the Cow, so we do have some idea that it was a cow. And so we know it's abstracted. They started with the natural appearance of a cow and then distorted it in some way. The third is non-representational art. This art can also be called non-objective or non-figurative, and it basically represents something that has no specific reference to anything outside of itself. And so a good example is this is what can come completely from our imaginations. It can also be a memory, something that no longer exists, and so they're representing a memory. So it's something that doesn't exist outside of itself. And so here's a piece here, Footscray by Nancy Graves, and this is just from her imagination. And so we just see different forms and colors and shapes and different materials that are used to create this piece. So all artwork will fall under one of these 3 categories. And the last thing I want to talk to you about for chapter 1 is this idea of looking and seeing. And so all of us who have vision can look. Looking is a very mechanical process, but we want to go a step further and actually see what the artwork is about and kind of delve a little farther into the artwork rather than just looking at it. And so 2 terms to help us kind of notice this is form is what we see. And so form is what the artist used, the different medium or media that the artist used, the size, where it's placed. This is what we see. And then content goes a step further than that. And this is the meaning we get behind what we see or what we look at. And so all of these different forms come together to create the content. And so let's look at an example of this with these 2 pieces here. They're both titled The Kiss. The one on the left is by Rodin in 1886, and the one on the right is by Brancusi in 1916. So they're both made out of stone, and they're both carved sculptures. And the one on the left is life-size figures. It's this Western ideals of the male and female figure. It's this highly charged moment of these lovers' embrace. And so we can almost feel the softness of the flesh compared to this rough stand that they're sitting on. This is very representational, and it gives us this feeling of love. We can see this lover's embrace, and so the content of this piece is this feeling of love. On the right, we have Brancusi's piece, The Kiss, and this is a solid stone, and so we had this very minimal cutting to create these 2 figures. This is actually an abstraction of 2 figures. And so this piece can kind of symbolize this idea of love, this lasting love, these 2 becoming one. And so the content of this piece would be more the idea of love. And so that was just a really simple example of how form influences content. And we're going to learn over the next couple of chapters some key things to look for in our forms to help guide us through the content and what the artist is trying to express to us.